Hello and welcome back to Jamie's Running. Today I would like to talk to you about my current shoe rotation. Let's get stuck in. Right, so if you could see the ground beneath my feet, you would be able to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pairs of shoes. So what I thought I'd do is put together a really quick high-level overview of each pair of shoes that I've got on my current rotation. So what type of runs do I use them for, what I like about them and what I dislike about them. I'm not going to get into loads of detail, fairly high level, and we'll cover off everything that I've got going on at the moment. So first up, and this is my first ever pair of Nike Pegasus Turbo 2. So I got this shoe in, I think it was July 2019. It was my first pair of Nikes, having run in Adidas up until then. And for me, it was a real game changer. So this very pair was the first pair of shoes that I managed to hit the elusive sub 90-minute half marathon. This pair has about 850 kilometers in it, still going strong to an extent. There's a few rips along the side there where the uppers come away from the midsole. The outsole's worn a little bit on the left shoe there, and on the right, actually on the lateral side of the outsole. But I did dig them out for the first time in a while a few days ago, and they did still feel pretty good to run in. Not one that I'd be training in every day now because they are pretty beat up. Now, this shoe, in my opinion, is a great all-rounder, whether you are going short and fast, long and slow, or anything in between. It was a go-to shoe for me. I would use it for half marathons, I would use it for tempo runs, I would use it for interval training. What I really like is that versatility. The only thing that I really disliked was probably the flexibility of the upper, or the lack of flexibility in the upper. So it's a fairly tough upper material, and it never really seemed to ease up over time. But that didn't really cause me much of a problem. It was still a shoe that I absolutely loved. So I had them in this colour, and I also picked them up last Christmas in the anti-winter edition. So this pair has, I think, about 750 kilometers in them. The lateral sides of the outsoles are absolutely battered in these ones. The white colorway lasted all of about 5 minutes when I got caught in a storm 3 days after I got the shoes and got really wet and muddy. But yes, 2 pairs of turbos in my rotation. Great shoes, great all-rounders. So these 2 pairs don't feature as much as they used to in my rotation, but they do still get dug out every now and again. And next up we have the Zoom Fly Flyknit. So I picked this pair up at the beginning of 2020. It's a slightly older version of the shoe, the most recent one being the Zoom Fly 3, but I really like the look of these. And I actually picked this pair up on StockX purely because I loved the look of them. So for me, I was using these primarily for intervals and a little bit of speed training. The carbon fiber plate just adds that little bit of extra propulsion over something like the Turbo 2. And for a little while, I did try and use them almost as a daily all-rounder, but the rigidity of that carbon fiber plate just meant they weren't really ideal for that. So what I probably like most about this shoe is the sock-like fit. It's one large Flyknit upper, but the downside to that is that you don't really have a great deal of security of fit. There is a little bit of instability, however, when you're taking on tight courses, you're not getting a really secure fit from that single upper. But they did serve me well. They don't come out of their drawer all that often now, partly because if you can see there, I've worn all the way through to the carbon fiber plate on the lateral side of my right foot. And again, I've got other shoes that I prioritize use of when I'm doing the speed work and intervals that I used to do in this pair. Right, so next up we are going to cover off the Hoka One One Carbon X. So I got this shoe in the summer this year. I'd read some great things about Hoka shoes. Unfortunately for me, this pair just doesn't work for me. It's supposed to be a fast shoe, it's a carbon plated shoe. I only use these now for really easy runs. And the only reason I am using them is because they were so expensive, I can't bear to just put them away and retire them for good. So yeah, the only use they're getting from me is shorter 5K to 10K easy runs where I'm not putting in any effort. The problem that I find with the shoe is that it's just a really weird feel. They feel really flat, they feel really wide, and they feel like they slap the floor as you run. Perhaps most bizarrely is there's a sensation inside the shoe of a line going right across the ball of your foot. I can't put my finger on what it is. You can't really feel anything when you rub your hand inside the shoe, but it's definitely there. I've tried different socks, I've tried everything. There's just a real element of discomfort when I'm running in this shoe. So yeah, it only gets used when I'm taking it easy, and other than that, it's not a pair that I'd opt to have in my rotation. And if it wasn't for the price, they'd be retired already. Now next up is the Brooks Hyperion Tempo, and this is a great shoe. I really like it. I've found it's a great all-rounder. It's a non-plated shoe, which is ideal for daily training. It's great whether you're going at an easy pace or whether you're going at a fast pace, and so I use this to really mix it up. Sometimes I'll use it for my long easy runs. My weekly half marathon is often covered off in this, but also I'll sometimes use it for a short fast 5k. So a couple of weeks ago I pushed the pace in this a little bit and got a 17.5 minute 5k. I've replaced the laces with some lock laces, so they're really easy to slip on and off. The fit is really comfortable. The upper's nice and flexible and nice and comfortable. There's ample cushioning as well, although on the longer runs where I'm going up to half marathon distance, once I hit the 10-mile mark, so around about 16 kilometers, those last 5 kilometers to take me up to the half marathon distance, my feet do start to feel a little bit beat down. You don't have a massive amount of cushion in this DNA Flash midsole, but it is responsive and it is super comfy to run in over those shorter distances. Again, a fantastic go-to shoe. There's nothing that I really dislike about it. I found that the wear is super on the outsole. There's almost no signs of wear at all actually, which is really unheard of for me. You saw from the other few pairs of shoes there that I tend to wear through the lateral side. I supinate slightly and I wear through the lateral side of my outsoles super fast usually. These have little to no wear at all, and I'm about 270 kilometers down in these already. And so I've been really impressed with how these have been. Great pair of shoes, fantastic ones to have in the rotation, love them. Right, next up, the Saucony Endorphin Speed. Now these are my absolute favorite shoes. If you saw my initial review of them, they're a pair of shoes that straight out of the box, they just won my heart over. I think I quoted in my video, I think that I'm in love, which is quite a bold statement 3 kilometers into your very first run. So I've had these, I think, for around about 3 or 4 months. I'm about 300 kilometers in, and they just still feel as responsive and great as they did on that very first run. They're a nylon plated shoe, so they give you that little bit of extra propulsion. I use them sometimes for short, fast runs. Sometimes I use them for my weekly half marathon, but I also use them for interval and speed training, fartlek sessions, that kind of thing. They're really great at transitioning from the easy pace up towards race pace and then slowing back and then going again. They're absolutely fantastic, really responsive, and they give back energy that you put into them. Absolutely love them. I absolutely love how they look. Saucony totally nailed it with the design, although the white material is starting to look a little bit weather beaten as we head into the wetter months. But if I could just choose one pair of shoes for the rest of my life, I think this would probably be them. They are showing some signs of wear on the lateral side of the outsole, particularly on the left shoe in this instance, but I haven't noticed any impact on the performance at all. They still feel and run great. There is absolutely nothing bad that I can say about this shoe. And anybody that asks me if I could pick one shoe, what would it be? My response is always the Saucony Endorphin Speed. Fantastic shoe, great one to have in the rotation. Right, next up, and it's the Nike Air Zoom Tempo Next Percent. So, this one caused a little bit of controversy. I bought them when they were first released in the UK a couple of months ago. I took them for a test run, I put together a YouTube review. They felt weird to run in, they were slapping the floor, they just didn't really seem to gel with me, and so I sent them back after 2 runs. I was recently gifted this pair, and so I took them on a tempo run 1 week ago, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised at how they performed at the faster pace. First time around I didn't really use them at that faster tempo pace. I did some intervals, but I was primarily running at conversation pace so that I could put together a YouTube review. So maybe I didn't give them a fair enough chance. Anyway, I've only covered 10 kilometers at tempo pace in this shoe. They performed really well last week. I'm going to put a little bit more focus on some speed training throughout the winter months, and so I am going to incorporate these to see how they perform on those faster paced runs. But yeah, a weird shoe to run in, but given the performance last week, I do think they deserve a place in my rotation, particularly for those faster runs. Alright, so next up, we have the Nike Pegasus Trail 2 Gore-Tex. So this is a fairly recent addition to my rotation. I put a YouTube review out a couple of weeks ago. Great shoe for the trails. I think they're going to be great for the winter. They are a heavier shoe. I'm going to use them as I want to incorporate a little bit more off-road and trail running. I've got some trails near where I live. I used to run them fairly frequently a couple of years ago. I've sort of been focusing on road running for the last 2 or 3 years, so I would like to go back and just incorporate that little bit of off-roading as well. I went out and hit the trails recently and then did an ultra marathon which was partly road and partly trails, and I really enjoyed it. So I do want to incorporate a little bit more of that into my running. And that's the reason I picked up the shoe. I think they're also going to be good as we hit the wet months. For shorter road runs, they'll be ideal for keeping your feet dry. The biggest upside for me is that they are waterproof, and so they'll be ideal for keeping dry during the autumn and winter months. I'm going to primarily use them for shorter road runs, trail runs, and a little bit of hiking and stuff like that as well. The downside to them, however, is the weight. So I ran a half marathon in them a couple of weeks ago, and the weight became really apparent, probably from the 10k mark all the way up to the 21km mark. And so for that reason, I wouldn't use them for anything over 10k on the road. They're also not a shoe for running fast in, but easy, shorter, wet runs, ideal. And this brings us into the racing shoes. So here we have my very first pair of Nike Vaporfly Next Percent. These were an absolute game changer for me. I picked them up pretty much exactly a year ago, and all of a sudden I beat every single one of my PBs by between 4.5% and 4.7%. I had thought it was all hype. I ran in them for the very first time and realized that the hype was real. Absolutely fantastic shoe. And I still think the pink colorway is one of the best on the Vaporfly Next Percent. I did get this pair personalized as well, so if you can see there my name alongside the swoosh. So I would use these for races if we were having any races this year. Alternatively, I use them when I want to run really, really fast. More recently, I've started to incorporate them into some of my speed training, so intervals. I used them this morning for a fartlek session, for example. I would never use these as a daily shoe. The carbon fiber plate and the lack of stability and support just doesn't really suit that type of running. These only really come out of the stable when I want to impress, when I want to push hard, and if I feel like running really, really fast. So what I love about them is the way they feel when they run. There's no real way to describe it, but if I take a fork, think about the carbon fiber plate. So take this fork. As you transition your weight towards the fork end of the fork, the rear of the fork springs up. And it's sort of the same with this shoe. As you transition your weight towards the front of the shoe, you just feel like you're being thrown forward into the next step. It's a really difficult feeling to explain, and the only way you'll understand is to run in them for yourself. This pair now have 285 kilometers in them. Unfortunately, I've found the outsoles aren't all that hard wearing. I don't know if you can see, but I've done a bit of a Frankenstein repair job on the outsole here, where I'd worn through the outsole, worn through the Zoom X foam and all the way down to the carbon fiber plate. I cut a little bit of outsole off an old pair of shoes and stuck it in there, really just to bridge that gap. Not ideal, but they do still feel good to run in, and the performance is still there. And for that reason, I have the Vaporfly Next Percent in Valerian Blue, which have a lot less miles in them, and I'm keeping these for race day, but I'm incorporating the pink pair into some more faster training. So yeah, fantastic shoes to have in the rotation. Probably my favoured racing shoe out of all of the racing shoes. Only downside I found is the wear on the outsoles. Very expensive, about £1 per kilometre. And last but not least, we have the Alphafly Next Percent. So if I thought the Vaporfly Next Percent looked weird when I first got them, these were just something else. They're completely out of this world. They look absolutely balmy, but I really like balmy, so it's all cool with me. This colorway still remains my favorite. It was the first colorway that was released, but I didn't manage to pick them up from Nike. I ended up having to spend almost 50% more than the RRP by picking them up on a reseller website. There was a whole issue with the supply and demand when they first got released. Resellers were wiping them all out and selling them at hugely marked up prices, which I totally disagreed with, but I had to get my hands on a pair. Now, I haven't done a great deal of miles in this shoe. Obviously, there have been no races this year. I have used them for a couple of virtual attempts and time trials, and even though they are heavier than the Vaporfly Next Percent, I did recently manage to get my first ever sub 17 minute 5k in them, so my 5k PB has been made in this shoe. I haven't yet attempted a half marathon PB, but those longer distances are where this shoe will come into its own. So they've got all of this extra cushioning with the AirPods at the front under the carbon fiber plate and this huge stack height in the Zoom X foam. but that extra cushioning comes with extra weight. And so it's going to take a slightly longer distance to really see the benefit of that extra cushioning, because over the shorter distances, that extra cushioning is going to be more than offset by the extra weight that you're carrying. So the thing that I like about this shoe is it's just an experience to run in. You can't really explain it unless you try it for yourself. It does feel really weird. The pods make a weird slapping noise, but you are getting loads of energy return with each step. And so it is a shoe that's built to go fast. My dislikes on this shoe is that it's got a really, really thin arch. So I've got quite wide and flat feet. So walking around in this shoe, it feels like I've got some sort of pyramid stabbing me in the arch of my foot there. Thankfully, when I'm running, I'm landing ahead of that archway. I'm landing on my fore to midfoot, and so I don't notice that during the run, but walking in them isn't the most comfortable. If I could only pick one race shoe, my preferred option would still be the Vaporfly Next%. I've never done a marathon, but if I were to do a marathon, I think I would probably opt for the Alphafly Next%. But I do look forward to giving a half marathon time trial a real good go using the shoe and to see how it performs. And so concludes my current running shoe rotation. Do you have any of these shoes? What do you think about them? Which ones are your favourite? Which ones are your least favourite? Are there any shoes that I don't have that you highly recommend that I should add to my Christmas list? Thanks again for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, all of that sort of great stuff, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Yo!